Welcome, everyone. It is our pleasure to have you all with us today to share the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy, a strategic framework developed by the Center for Global Development, the Asia Foundation, CIPPEC, Women Deliver, and the International Center for Research on Women in support of the Global Alliance for Care. The roadmap maps the global care landscape and its opportunities, highlights existing data and gaps in measurement, supports coordination efforts, and provides insights to inform future advocacy, research, policy action, and financing. It focuses on specific recommendations and existing metrics to highlight care at key global moments with the ultimate goal of elevating and integrating care on a global scale by 2030. Today, we will hear from experts from governments, civil society, multilateral organizations, and donors on how the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy, or GRAC as we call it, is relevant to their work and discuss how we can work together to implement its recommendations. Before we begin, let me share a few housekeeping notes. Interpretation is available from Spanish to English and vice versa by clicking on the globe icon and selecting your preferred language. That's also a reminder both to myself and our guests today to slow down when speaking to make our interpreters' jobs easier. It is also important to please remember to stay muted and put any questions you may have for our speakers in the chat, which we will be monitoring throughout. Finally, please note that this event is being recorded and will be available online on the CGD webpage after today. With that, let me go to the moment we've all been waiting for. Please welcome Kelsey Harris, Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for Global Development, and Ankita Panda, Senior Program Officer with the Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality Team at the Asia Foundation, who'll share an overview of the GRAC with us today.
Thank you so much, Fatini, and thank you all for joining us today to learn about the Global Roadmap. So I'll jump right in. Many of you are very familiar with the interlocking challenges that we see globally when it comes to care work, such as under-recognition of unpaid care work and entrenched patriarchal gender norms. These structural challenges are compounded by conflict and crises and came to a head during COVID-19. And as a result, we've seen a surge of interest and recognition in the care economy. We've also seen promising international and national action on care, including the historic ILO resolution this year on care and support, and care policies and systems being put into place in countries all around the world, like Kenya, Chile, and Brazil. However, policy programming and financing gaps remain, and sectoral silos persist. Coordinated and strategic messaging and advocacy has been a challenge, particularly connecting what's happening from the local to the global level. Addressing this is critical for global momentum to continue. Last year at the Women Deliver conference, all of this was discussed, and we decided that a global roadmap was needed to connect the dots, figure out where the gaps are, and chart a path forward. Thus, our 5 organizations, with the critical guidance of our advisory committee, many of which are here today, came together to develop the roadmap, a framework that outlines where the care economy stands globally, is grounded in data and evidence, and proposes specific actions to propel progress between now and 2030. As a result of implementing this roadmap, our vision is that by 2030, these global gaps will start to be addressed. We know that progress takes time, but we believe that with strategic and deliberate action, care will become a more central issue in policymaking and financing. And this shift will ultimately help us all to achieve the SDGs and inform the next set of development goals. So you may be wondering who this is for, and the answer is that really any stakeholder that is working to influence change in this space, we think that this will be a useful tool for you. So now we're going to jump in and give a quick overview of the roadmap framework. The framework is in a table that spans several pages in the roadmap. Each recommendation is a distinct row in the framework, and it is accompanied by 4 additional elements. These include indicators that are being globally tracked, baseline data from those institutions tracking the indicators, priority actions needed to advance progress, and then a specific quantitative goal for 2030. And some of these goals have been set by international institutions like the UN, while others we have set based on the available data and what we can expect can realistically happen in the next 6 years. We have 4 overarching recommendations that are focused on investments, integration and coordination, policy change, and research and data. So we are going to highlight the recommendations that are included in the framework under each of these categories, but we invite you to read on to learn more about the underlying data and goals within each of these, as unfortunately, we don't have time to cover them all in depth. The first set of recommendations is focused on investments. 1.1, our recommendation, is to increase investments on equitable quality care services. This includes childcare, disability care, and long-term care. This recommendation is aligned with one of the generation equality recommendations, and it's worth discussing further given its criticality to so much of the rest of the roadmap. In our research, we found that childcare data was very limited. It included only pre-primary education in most countries, and the only statistics that combined childcare with pre-primary education spending were published by the OECD. Even the OECD, which includes mostly high-income countries, showed spending was an average of 0.8% of GDP, which is below the global target of 1%. And data for the rest of the world was very spotty on childcare. Similarly, we found that OECD countries spent an average of 1.8% of GDP on long-term care, but data beyond that was very limited. So our recommendation on this is to both increase spending on public care services and publish more public data on childcare, especially for children aged 0 to 2, as well as long-term care. The 2030 goals are to see 3 to 10% of national income towards equitable quality care services, 1% of GDP to pre-primary education, and 10% of education spending to pre-primary education. The next recommendation, 1.2, is on increasing bilateral and multilateral foreign aid to support care services and infrastructure. Moving on to the second set of recommendations, this is focused on coordination and advocacy. 2.1 is around the government's role as primary duty bearers of care and the creation and maintenance of space for policy leaders to work together to share what works. 2.2 is around better inclusion and integration of care in multilateral forums and investment. And I'm going to hold further discussion on these 2 points, given that we will hear from the Global Alliance for Care, as well as cross-sectoral experts on our panel shortly, who will no doubt share perspectives on these recommendations. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ankita.
Great, thanks so much, Kelsey. I'll take us through the last few recommendations in the global roadmap, starting with the third recommendation, which is the need to accelerate policy change across the care economy. On this slide, we include 4 examples of the kinds of policies that need to be strengthened and expanded. This includes, for example, recommendation 3.1, which is that we need to have universal access to quality, affordable, and accessible childcare. Recommendation 3.2 talks about the need to strengthen comprehensive support systems, especially for aged and long-term care. Another policy that's critical is not only to ensure that paid maternity leave and parental leave exist, but that they also adhere to the ILO's Maternity Protection Convention that mandates a minimum of 14 weeks of paid leave for women around childbirth, although optimally, the maternity leave should be longer than that. And then finally, recommendation 3.4 talks about the need to ensure adequate paid leave is in place. When we say adequate, we mean leave that supports all family members of the household that need care, including persons with disability and others, in addition to one's children and aging parents. And then finally, just moving on to the fourth recommendation of the roadmap, which is to strengthen the evidence base, data collection, and dissemination of rigorous and robust research on care. This often comes up as a recommendation in many conversations around the care economy, which is the need to have more data. In our roadmap, we try to identify specific data gaps for which additional investments are needed. For example, even when data does exist on the care economy, it tends not to be disaggregated in terms of the different types of care expenditures. For example, whether it's a national level expenditure or foreign expenditure, for example. Moreover, we need to conduct more regular time use surveys to determine just how much time is spent on unpaid domestic and care work. And this data needs to be disaggregated by sex, age, disability, and location. It's also important that we prioritize more high-quality research and evaluation studies that are focused on effective care practices and policies. This means we need to focus on collecting or producing evidence about what works when it comes to existing practices, policies, and interventions on the care economy. And we also need to think through how can we more intentionally highlight these practices and explore their potential for adaptation and replication. So I hope that with that, it gives you a small overview of how the roadmap is structured and what it contains. In the interest of time, we were not able to go through each of these sections in detail to cover the metrics against each recommendation, but I do urge you to take a look at that after today's discussion. But I wanted to just pivot quickly to some key takeaways and next steps. Starting with the key takeaways, Kelsey already touched upon some of this, so I'll try to go through this quickly, but one of the takeaways was that we were pleasantly surprised to see that when it comes to having some form of maternity leave in place, 122 countries already provide at least 14 weeks of paid maternity leave. That being said, almost the same number of countries provide no paid leave for workers to meet the care needs of other family members and relatives. Moreover, having maternity leave in place does not translate to having sufficient childcare provision. For example, only 60 countries have quality child-based childcare services. So while there's some progress in terms of the existence of certain crucial policies, we still need to do more. Perhaps less surprising is that we found that spending on pre-primary education could be much higher. I won't go through the stats. Kelsey mentioned this already, but when it comes to long-term care, and especially disability care, this data is much harder to find, and we need much more centralized and systematic tracking. Finally, we need much more coordination both within but also among governments. Because the care economy does not sit squarely within any particular agency or ministry of the government, it intersects with gender as well as labor, economic growth, education, and healthcare, for example. There needs to be much more dedicated coordination mechanisms within the government. And we are seeing some examples of this. In countries like Nepal and Cambodia, there are interministerial task forces, which are usually being led by the Ministry of Women's Affairs, but are including representatives from different agencies, including the relevant agencies that I mentioned, labor and education and others, who come together to collectively develop cohesive strategies for care. These are the types of models we need to better document and invest in, as it would improve better coordination on care. The roadmap also presents a list of major international events and platforms that are pivotal opportunities for us to elevate the care agenda and to foster global cooperation. These are events where we believe there is the greatest potential globally for governments, civil society organizations, and advocates to really influence care policies and secure funding commitments. I won't be able to go through each event in detail, but I do hope that this is a useful resource for mapping what kinds of forums we should be prioritizing, or at least should be on our radar in terms of amplifying some of this work on care. And finally, just moving on to next steps. We see the global roadmap as a starting point in a much longer conversation to be had about building resilient care systems. For the roadmap to be effective, we really hope to be able to elevate and socialize the recommendations from the roadmap in critical global and regional and other national forums. We've also been in touch with the Global Alliance for Care about identifying opportunities to integrate the roadmap into their engagement with members. This could include, for example, exploring the opportunity to translate the roadmap into national strategies and action plans on care. We also hope that the roadmap can inform more targeted knowledge products and policy briefs. The roadmap right now, it's meant to be global, but we do recognize that there's merit in being able to deep dive into some of the individual components of the roadmap. For example, each of the recommendations in the roadmap could be its own standalone policy brief or its own research paper. And we hope that the roadmap helps inform more discussion, targeted discussion around the different dimensions of the care economy, especially regionally and also nationally. Ideally, with additional resources, the hope is also to implement some of the recommendations in the roadmap. And one idea is to have a monitoring and evaluation plan that consistently tracks the metrics that are laid out in the roadmap over the next 6 years and updates the roadmap accordingly so that we can see how we're doing in terms of progress. And finally, we would, of course, love to be able to secure more funding in order to implement the roadmap, and also to ensure that our partners are able to use the roadmap for their own implementation as well. So those are just a few next steps that we have in mind, but we'd, of course, love to brainstorm with you as well in order to action the roadmap moving forward. We hope that the global roadmap provides a blueprint to transform care into a globally recognized priority, and we look forward to working with all of you to bring this vision to life. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. You'll see on the right-hand side, these are the organizing partners for the global roadmap. We would be happy to answer your questions or comments and also just hear your ideas about how we can move this forward. Thank you so much, and looking forward to the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Kelsey and Ankita, for this comprehensive and succinct presentation of the roadmap. Our emails are also in the chat, and don't forget, everyone, please remember to drop any questions you may have in the chat. With that, let me now welcome our first guest for today, Ms. Lorenza Bordamalo Guerrero, a specialist with the Ministry of Equality and Equity of Colombia. She will be speaking in Spanish, so now is your time to choose your interpretation channel if you need it. Ms. Bordamalo, welcome. The floor is yours.
Hola, buenos días para todas. Un saludo enorme desde Colombia. A nosotras nos gustaría compartirles los avances que tiene nuestro país en términos de cuidado. Colombia es uno de los países pioneros en sistemas de cuidado en América Latina y en el mundo. Empezamos con el sistema de cuidado de Bogotá y actualmente con un gobierno que tiene una perspectiva diferente sobre los cuidados. Estamos intentando avanzar hacia la construcción de una sociedad cuidadora donde el Estado garantice el derecho a recibir cuidado, el derecho a cuidar en condiciones dignas y reconozca, proteja y fortalezca las formas colectivas y comunitarias de cuidado para posicionar el cuidado como centro del sostenimiento de la vida. Digamos que nuestro gobierno en este momento está comprometido en garantizar la vida. Colombia ha sido un país que históricamente ha atravesado afectaciones por conflicto armado, etcétera. Y nuestro Sistema Nacional de Cuidado está relacionado directamente con el sostenimiento de la vida. Pero además queremos aportar al debate internacional de los cuidados, teniendo una mirada del cuidado que vaya más allá del cuidado de las personas y lo individual y fortalezca la visión colectiva y comunitaria de los cuidados, que tiene que ver con el cuidado de los comunes, con el cuidado de la vida en todas sus expresiones, del agua, de los bosques. Colombia también es uno de los países más biodiversos del mundo y nos interesa mucho relacionar nuestro Sistema Nacional de Cuidado con la protección de la biodiversidad, más ahorita que somos sede de la COP. Y para eso estamos trabajando en 5 objetivos en nuestro Sistema Nacional de Cuidado. El primer objetivo es fortalecer nuestras formas comunitarias de cuidado y nuestras formas propias. Colombia también es un país con diversos grupos étnicos, culturales, y nos interesa fortalecer esas redes sociales y comunitarias de cuidado que están presentes en nuestra sociedad y que han sostenido la vida cuando el Estado no ha garantizado el derecho a cuidado. La segunda tiene que ver con garantizar los derechos de las personas cuidadoras, porque en el mundo, en Colombia y en el mundo, han sido principalmente las mujeres quienes han asumido estos trabajos de cuidado y esto a muy altos costos, ¿no? Con pobreza de tiempo, con falta de garantía de derechos como el derecho a la educación, a la salud, al trabajo, a la pensión. Entonces, nuestra idea es lograr mitigar esos impactos de la división sexual del trabajo y garantizar los derechos para las personas cuidadas. Nuestro tercer objetivo es garantizar el derecho al cuidado. Es decir, que las personas con discapacidad, que los niños y niñas, las personas mayores, encuentren un Estado que garantice el derecho al cuidado y no sean principalmente los hogares quienes se están encargando, como sucede actualmente, de esta actividad tan importante para el sostenimiento de la vida. Nuestro cuarto objetivo es la transformación cultural. En esto estamos invitando a los hombres principalmente y a la ciudadanía en general a asumir los cuidados en igualdad, porque ninguna sociedad sobrevive sin cuidados, todas las personas y seres vivos necesitamos del cuidado y pues debe ser un compromiso de la sociedad en su conjunto garantizar pues esta actividad fundamental para la continuidad de la vida misma. Y finalmente, estamos trabajando en robustecer el Estado para garantizar derechos, en hacer el Estado más grande, ampliar la cobertura, ampliar la capacidad que tiene nuestro Estado para pues garantizar los derechos de las personas. Entonces, en este sentido, queremos invitar a todos los países del mundo a que se sumen en esta iniciativa de garantizar el cuidado como un derecho, de enmarcar los sistemas de cuidado en lenguaje de derechos que vaya mucho más allá de la asistencia y busque transformar pues la división sexual del trabajo, pero también garantizar los derechos de las personas y proteger la vida en todas sus expresiones. Entonces, esta es nuestra invitación. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. En Colombia estamos pues con los brazos abiertos para apoyar en la construcción y en el acompañamiento a sistemas de cuidado en todo el mundo. Cuenten con nuestro país y pues con nuestro interés de proteger la vida en todas sus expresiones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bordamalo. I very much appreciated your points on the right to care and its linkages with caring not just for human beings, but also for the environment, biodiversity, linking the local, the communitarian, and the social with broader international structures and calling to men and a whole of society to take on their share of caring. Now, with that, we are very pleased today to be joined by our panel who will share their perspectives on key updates and initiatives in the care economy and opportunities to implement the roadmap and its recommendations. We have with us today Laura Adati, a maternity protection and work family specialist with the International Labour Organization, Carolina Robino, a senior program officer at Canada's International Development Research Centre, and Wessel van der Berg, senior advocacy officer with Equimundo, Centre for Masculinities and Social Justice. Welcome to all of you. We're very interested in hearing about developments or initiatives within your organizations and institutions that are working to advance the care economy and how you see this work aligning with any of the recommendations set forward in the GRAC. Laura, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much, Fotini, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to TGD and the Asia Foundation and all the partners for inviting the ILO for the launch on this very important roadmap, very comprehensive. We would like to congratulate on the process and the result. And it would be really an important tool, and congratulate also the reference to existing framework. And it's great to be here today. Also, this launch is very momentous as the world celebrates the International Day of Care and Support. It is another indication of the importance that this theme is gaining in international, regional, and national agendas. From the ILO perspective, as also highlighted in the presentation, we have the International Labour Conference has adopted an historic resolution that affirms the value of care work, both paid and unpaid, that plays in every society and economy. But as we've heard often, it goes unrecognized, unvalued, and unresourced. And this is really what this roadmap aims to transform. And so to support these efforts and the aim of having evidence-based policy action and monitoring, on the 29th, the ILO released new global and regional estimates that are based on the ILO harmonized microdata repository on labor force survey that show the impact of care responsibilities on women labor force participation. It shows that in 2023, 740 million people aged 15 and above were outside the labor force due to care responsibilities. And of those, 708 million are women. So the gender differences are really stark. And also when we look at sociodemographic data disaggregation, we find that certain groups of women, low educated, women in prime age and from rural areas and from low and middle income countries are particularly vulnerable to shoulder this high share of care responsibility. So these, the organization, the International Labour Organization, is deeply committed to advance the agenda that the resolution calls for, namely ensuring decent work in the care economy and promoting decent work by ensuring access to care for all. And really, the idea behind this resolution is that decent work in the care economy is not optional, and ILO constituents, workers, employers, and governments have now a roadmap to tackle the challenges in the care economy and to create and strengthen rights-based, coherent, and integrated care and support policies and systems that are grounded social dialogue and international labor standards and are guided by the 5R framework on decent care work. I'll stop here and give you more details for the next question.
Thank you, Lara. And it is indeed telling that despite the growing recognition of the need for better care policies, some of these disparities persist. Hopefully, we will begin to make some inroads in these statistics. Let me now pass the question to Wessel van der Berg.
Thank you so much, Foteini, and likewise, I agree with Laura's congratulations and celebrations. It's wonderful to be here after that first conversation in Kigali last year. So in terms of the initiatives that we're involved in as Ecomundo, our key campaign that many of the colleagues on the call are connected to or might have heard of is the Men Care campaign that has 120 partners around the world in 70 countries. And our goal as a feminist campaign is to see men doing half of the daily unpaid care work in aggregate around the world. And, as you know, men's contribution to care matters for gender equality, but also care matters for men's mental health and well-being. So men are not only instrumental for gender equality, but men also benefit from care and from gender equality. So in terms of the initiatives that I'd like to refer to, there's two, and I'm going to speak about research, and that very much connects to the section in the GRAC that refers to evidence generation, section 4, and then about some of the policy advocacy work that we're doing, talking about the acceleration of policies in section 3 of the GRAC. Our main research output is the State of the World's Fathers report that comes out every 2 years. And the previous one was in 2023. The next one is coming out next year. And a key finding from the one that came out last year, where we managed to collect data from 17 countries with just under 12,000 respondents, was that women and men support care policies around the world in a range of different contexts. So much so that, especially, it was surprising to see, or not surprising, but I guess validating to see that men were willing to make sacrifices like taking overtime, taking unpaid leave from work, changing jobs to be able to access more care support and to have more support from care policies in their context. Then from the research to switch to some of the work we're doing on accelerating policy reforms. We've got a number of policy platforms that we've worked with over a number of years. The first one is the Men Care Parental Leave platform, which we launched in 2013. And we've been advocating, along with the ILO and all of the wonderful partners around the world, for parental leave for all parents. And our specific ask is paid equal leave that includes a non-transferable portion for especially for fathers. And we've seen in a number of countries that men simply, don't take the leave if there's no non-transferable section. In my country, in South Africa, we have got a very exciting constitutional court case hearing tomorrow about a case that is making the constitutional argument for equal leave for all parents. So the hearing is tomorrow. We hope to have news on the judgment early next year. And then secondly, to go a little bit beyond parental leave, we've also launched a platform which we call the MenCare 50/50 Commitment Platform, which also extends to employers. And it asks government departments and employers to think about reforms like parental leave, but also reforms to health systems, also reforms to social protection, as the GRAC also points out. And again, data, making data great again. So better data gathering, especially time use surveys, sex disaggregated comparisons of men and women's contribution to care. And then finally, to normalize men's caregiving within the private sector. So to see senior leadership in companies actually using parental leave, using some of the marketing channels within companies to promote caregiving. So those are the two initiatives that I'll refer to. The one is the research project on the state of the world's fathers, and then the two MenCare parental leave platforms. And it's wonderful to see how well they complement the GRAC, and the GRAC complements that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Wessel, for this very informative presentation. And it will be interesting to see how that constitutional hearing goes. We'll have to wait a year, as you said, for it, but for the actual decision. But hopefully there is momentum for a diverse set of reforms and a need for stronger coordination across all of these stakeholders. Let me now turn to you, Carolina, for your intervention.
Sure. So thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation, for which I am really honored and grateful. So it's a real pleasure to join you today and to represent Canada's International Development Research Center. Very quickly, for those of you who doesn't know us, IDRC is actually part of Canada's foreign affairs and development efforts, and our strategy is to engage and support research in the Global South, for the Global South, and by the Global South, to address critical knowledge and innovation gaps and to build more sustainable and inclusive societies. And the launch of the GRAC reflects work that the organizations leading this effort have been orchestrating. I was thinking back, maybe almost 3 years ago, and actually had the opportunity to work with many of you since the beginning in the Valley Care Economy dialogue, then followed by the Women Deliver Care Pre-Conference and more. And all these processes actually informed the recommendations of the GRAC. So I'm personally very happy to see the fruits of that collaboration materialize in the GRAC launch today, for which I also had the honor, as some of the panelists here, to contribute as part of the advisory committee. So to answer your questions, at IDRC, we have been working on the care economy for more than 15 years ago. And actually, our first generation of programming was looking at how unpaid care work is is that key structural barrier that stands in the way of progress on gender equality and inclusion. So working with our partners from the Global South, our programming focused at that time on research that demonstrated how care responsibilities and the unfair distribution of care work hamper women economic empowerment. But more recently, I would say in the last 5 years or so, we moved towards supporting research on what could be done to address this through funding applied research on what works, one of the key recommendations of the GRAC. So in Latin America, we support a care systems innovation fund, and we developed this fund to actually encourage applied research to contribute to build and strengthen care systems in the region. And the uniqueness of the fund, I think, is that it incentivizes collaboration between local researchers and policymakers. So these projects are developed in partnership. And one of the initiatives in the fund actually involves a partnership with the government of Colombia, on what Lorenza highlighted, which is how to strengthen community caregiving as part, and recognize community caregiving as part of the building of a care system that sustains life for people, but also for the planet. And given the interest of this first round of the fund, we launched a second call, which has closed. So we will now have 10 projects spanning across Latin America to support national and local governments to advance in terms of building comprehensive care systems through rigorous evidence on what works. Again, one of the recommendations of the GRAC. And a key role of the applied research that we are supporting, I think, and I hope, is to contribute to strengthen the sustainability of care systems, to help in a way protect some of these innovations that we are seeing are being implemented, but that are fragile to the political cycle. We have seen that in many countries, even when these care systems are mandated in law, changes in government can mean that the funding for this is curtailed in the budget. So we hope that the research on the impacts of these comprehensive care policies and systems is also important and help advocate for the continuity and resourcing of these policies. Another recent initiative that I would like to mention, because I see it very aligned to the recommendations of the GRAC, is our Scaling Care Innovations in Africa program, which focuses on tackling tested solutions on unpaid care, taking tested solutions on unpaid care work to scale, but also amplifying Southern voice and strengthening capacities. And this program is co-funded by Global Affairs Canada and IDRC, and it's a 5-year initiative that we started last year. So the program focuses on scaling the impact, which is not the same as scaling a program or a policy. So the emphasis here is on scaling the impact with 2 streams of work. One is on policies, and the other is on program innovations. And we are doing this through 19 action research projects across 15 countries in Africa. And I think a key feature of the programming is this need to be driven locally, including on priority setting, which again aligns with the idea of the Global Roadmap for Action, that these local priorities are speaking to the care solutions and framing this in the specific context, something that sometimes get lost in global discussions. So all these projects are using research to scale solutions to transform the world of care. Many of them are informing policies at the national, regional, or local level. And the research is really conceptualized to be propositional in nature to help inform advocacy actions. Again, one key goal of the Global Roadmap for Action. And what I would also like to highlight is that we see and we agree with the recommendation of the GRAC on the need to foster joint learning and collaboration and coordination. And because of this, and other reasons, IDRC is a member, and we actively engage and support the Global Alliance for Care as a unique multi-stakeholder platform to advance the care agenda. As part of this, we fund the Global Alliance for Care digital learning community, which I invite all of you to use and contribute to, which is actually referenced in the GRAC as an action item. And the other, I had two more quick examples that I would like to quickly mention. One is aligned to what the Besa was saying on the need, of course, to always highlight that governments are the duty bearers of care systems, of course, but public investment will not be enough. And we really require and urgently need to transform the private sector to become a co-responsible actor for the transformation of the care economy. So for this, we are supporting an action-oriented research program. I think I saw one of our partners from Core Global in the participants in this event. And what we are trying to do is to mobilize impact investing to support impactful social care enterprises and innovative care businesses, and to showcase how businesses and investors in any sector can be part of the solution. Part of the work is actually looking at innovative technologies that save women time, and some of them that can actually reduce carbon emissions. So we are trying to bring the climate agenda closer to the care agenda. And this takes me to my final cluster of programming that we support at IDRC, which is that we are really trying to unpack the care and climate nexus to build a stronger understanding that care is central to climate justice. Of course, feminist movements have been advocating and contributing to understand that gender is crucial for gender equality is crucial for climate justice. But an underexplored issue has been the link between care work, climate change, climate resilience, and environmental sustainability. So we have a relatively new program that I will be happy to share in the chat that is really looking at these intersections. So this, I think, is also important and aligned to one of the recommendations we haven't discussed from the GRAC, which is around the need to center care in any infrastructure investment, in particular on the clean energy and low carbon transition. And this, I think we are going to discuss in the final question. I think this agenda and push and urgent call to bring climate and care conversations together is really important and aligned to the recommendation of the GRAC for the better inclusion and cross-cutting integration of care across multilateral forums and investments. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. I think we have touched on so many key issues in this agenda, going from the evidence on the differential impact of care responsibilities to reforms that are needed across a range of sectors, from the constitutional to the private sector, to the individual level. And then I think now you've touched upon some very key topics such as the sustainability of these investments and their linkages with broader financial agendas and thematic topics like climate and the climate investments that we need to see, and investments in infrastructure. Strengthening all those linkages can also strengthen innovations and investments in the care agenda as well. With that, let me go back to Laura and ask all of you, but start with Laura. What is one upcoming global or regional moment that you are looking to as an important inflection point or influencing moment for the care economy? And if you can talk a little bit about how you are engaging around that moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have actually an important inflection point going on right now as the ILO governing body is discussing the plan of action to give follow-up to the resolution on decent work and the care economy adopted in last June. The action plan includes a structure around 4 components, one on knowledge development, dissemination, and communication, technical advisory services and capacity building for constituents, international labor standard action, social dialogue, and statistical standards, and ILO global leadership, policy coherence, and partnership. So a lot of this, the work that will be discussed and approved, I would say really aligns, and there are a lot of synergy with the GRAC roadmap. For instance, when we talk about knowledge development and dissemination, there will be a rich agenda that also will touch upon, the link between care and decent work in the care economy with technological change, climate change, but also, demographic trends, which are very important. And how will this also affect working conditions? And there is a call also for ILO constituents to monitor the impact, for instance, on climate change. So this is very important. There is also, when we think about the importance of creating priority 2, component 2 of the GRAC action plan, this links very well with the action plan related to the need for building capacity of constituents and partners on how we can reach this whole of government approach, but that doesn't overlook also the richness that the community also brings, as we heard from the case of Colombia, and the resolution also captures that. But I would like to particularly focus on the third component of the action plan, that first calls for efforts to ratify and implement international labor standards on related to the care economy, including the fundamental conventions. And many of you may remember, the importance of giving, freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining, guaranteeing non-discrimination, equal pay for work of equal value, but also safe working conditions and safe environments to care workers, and also promoting, and we really look congratulate the authors of the roadmap by linking the ratification and implementation of convention like 189 on decent work for domestic worker, 146, 149 on nursing personnel, 190 on violence and harassment, preventing and eliminating violence and harassment in the world of work, which are very important international labor standards, but also linking to the alignment of care policies to minimum international labor standards on maternity protection, workers with family responsibilities. All this is also reinforced in the ILO plan of action as a follow-up of the resolution. So I think this is very important. So going beyond, of course, the 14 weeks, but also ensuring, leave for, all caregivers. So this very much aligns also with what the initiative of the speakers and the roadmap. And I would like also to point to a forthcoming really important milestone that will be discussed next week. Is a call by the resolution. The ILO is also tasked to carry out research to be discussed at the tripartite meeting to assess whether there are gaps in the ILO body of international labor standards related to paternity, parental protection, and other care leave for sick or critically ill family members, older persons, or persons with disability. And if so, then what normative or non-normative action could be appropriate. So the date and the format of the tripartite meeting will be discussed next week. Another important milestone that we would like to highlight is also that the ILO is tasked to develop international statistical standards definition and a measurement framework for care work. This initiative built on last year mandate of the International Conference of Labor Statisticians, which instructed the ILO to establish, carry out work to establish a statistical standard process, setting process on care work. So there will be a group of experts representing ILO constituents, but also international experts that will bring together national experiences, best practices, aiming really to deliver harmonized recommendations to hopefully be adopted in at the International Labor Statistic Conference in 2028. So I think this really speaks to the commitment and the engagement and the mandate from the resolution on developing harmonized, comparable, better data on both paid and unpaid care work. But in the meantime, the ILO also offers in the ILO staff database. It's the global database on labor statistics, various indicators on care that can be used to monitor implementation of the roadmap. The database includes not only the recently published data on persons outside the labor force due to care responsibility, but also care employment statistics. Also, you will know that there is also a diary-based time use module for labor force service that has been published, and now we also have a guide for the measurement of on-use provision of services that includes, detailed guidance around this light survey. That is very important also to have to capture simultaneous activity around the paid work, and also to have a standardized measurement. Of course, many of you know also the ILO Care Portal, a policy investment simulator that has been expanded this year to cover almost 120 countries. It provides, as you know, data that can inform, this investment case for care, and can also offer data monitor the implementation and also track investments, job creation, return on investment, and also how this investment impact on reducing gender equality in employment and pay. So we have a number of tools, a rich agenda, commitment. So we hope that this can really act in synergy with the work, with the roadmap, and all the partners can work together to make this commitment a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for this very detailed presentation of upcoming key moments and initiatives. Let me pass on to Carolina, because I know you may soon have to leave us. So I want to give you the opportunity to share your upcoming moments.
Yeah, no, thank you. And very briefly, we are working on many of the global moments mentioned in the Global Roadmap for Action as suggested priorities. As we think we are in kind of an inflection point where, on the one side, the conversation on care has been growing, but on the other, there are important backlashes. So it is a key moment to continue to build coalitions and to sustain the momentum. We are many of these key global moments that are mentioned in the GRAC, we are actually engaged in, and we are very keen to support and to actually collaborate with many of you, such as on the COP and the financing for development. But today, I would like to focus on one, because it's just fast approaching, which is around the relevance of engaging with the G20 on the care agenda. As many of you know, the G20 actually brings together the biggest economies, and it's an important coordinating and an agenda setting platform. And while care has been mentioned and included in many of the G20 declarations, as the Global Roadmap for Action clearly noted, most of it, the references to care has been around a barrier to facilitate women labor force participation, which is one of the G20 commitments and the Brisbane Declaration. So we are really working together with many of the partners that are here today to help, on the one side, promote some of the commitments and transform them into concrete policies and investments, so moving kind of declarations into actions, but also hopefully to contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of the role of care as key for sustainable development, and that it goes beyond the women issue. So with that in mind, we are co-hosting, as I said, with many of the partners here today, an event during the G20 Social Summit in Rio on November 13th. I hope that, I think some of my colleagues are including the information in the chat. And the goal really for the G20 to act on the potential of comprehensive care and support system to build thriving societies, and as a tool to address the interlocking crisis in which we are living today. So I really invite you to join us, if you can, in person in Rio. I promise it's going to be an important moment. And if you don't have the chance to be in Rio, there is going to be a online transmission, so you can see and access the information on the chat. But we really think this is an important moment, and not only in Brazil, but really thinking that next year the G20 goes to South Africa, so it's a key moment for the Global South to elevate their priorities as well, and the centrality of the care agenda for sustainable development. So I will leave it there, but please join us in this effort and in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. I'm happy to report I will be there in Rio to continue the conversation and hope to see many of you there. And indeed, the global calendar looks very, very busy in the next upcoming few months. Wessel, over to you for your thoughts on key moments.
Sure. So two key moments, one that's very scary and the other one that's optimistic. So the scary one, I think, is quite predictable, what's happening next week. Our head office is in Washington, D.C., so of course I'm referring to the US election. And we've been advocating in the context of the US election for men's thinking as parents, both as politicians, but also as voters. So I put my vote like a dad pin on in a few moments ago, and I'll put the link in the chat. But the idea is that voting like a parent, voting like a dad, brings to the front of mind policy decisions like paid leave, policy decisions like childcare investments, policy decisions like living wages. And we're very happy to partner with the US Congressional Dads Caucus on that, which is a bipartisan caucus. It's nonpartisan, or it's bipartisan. The idea being an emphasis on care and mobilizing men's roles in society as caregivers. So that's the scary one. We'll see what happens next week. The one that's a bit more optimistic is also referring to Rio and to Brazil, but it's 18 months from now, in May 2026. We are very happy to announce that we will be hosting a global summit on fatherhood, caregiving, and equality. And the idea is that it will mobilize policymakers, decision makers in the private sector, and influence, well, media makers, media production makers, especially in online and streaming media, to converge around what it would take to shift the structures that could enable men's contribution to caregiving in society. So that will happen in May of 2026. You can keep your eye on the Men Care and Ecomundo channels for announcements on that. We'll also have a moment at CSW next year where we highlight that. We are very happy that we are being supported by the Global Alliance of Care in that. And we are also partnering with the Inter-Parliamentary Union on mobilizing parliamentarians to participate in the event. And there will be a dedicated policy advocacy track that we're already starting to work on. Next year, 2025, we're going to host a few regional summits leading up to that, again, mobilizing policy decision makers and decision makers in the private sector and media spaces. So those are the two key moments. And yeah, I would love to see everybody in Brazil in 18 months, not in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. One final round of very brief concluding remarks from each one of you. Super brief because we're running a little bit behind. Let me start with Carolina because I know she needs to leave soon, and then we'll go to Laura and Basil. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you. No, very briefly, I maybe just to congratulate the authors and the team around the Global Roadmap for Action, and an invitation to actually put it into action, to use it as an important tool to translate this growing recognition of the importance of care work as a social investment and as a public good that is central for sustainable development. So really, to think about care as a pillar of a different development paradigm that is centered on life for humans, but also for our planet. So I really think that we really need to move forward in that understanding of the centrality of care for everyone. So thank you so much for the invitation to join us, and apologies that I now have to leave.
Thank you, Carolina.
And
Laura, please.
yes, and just to reiterate the idea that care is foundational, and as the resolution mentions, as just as labor is not a commodity, labor in the care economy is not a commodity. And if we want to succeed really in transforming the care economy, we should really think about addressing the care economy in its integrity. So when we look at the 5R, really try not to overlook the fourth and the fifth R, rewarding and representing paid care workers, domestic workers, migrant, personal care workers, teachers, nurses, and their aid, that also we want to see as a less feminized sector, so a sector also for men, so for parity, and because really decent work is foundational to the care economy, as the care economy is foundational to decent work and gender equality. So I would like to conclude with a slogan of the International Domestic Workers Federation, to really take care of those who take care of us. So we don't forget really to care workers, the unpaid carers, and care receivers. And so thank you for having the ILO today. I really congratulate you on the roadmap. Also my co-panelists on the great initiatives. We really need all our efforts and all this synergy to really transform the care economy in these also turbulent times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura and Wessel. Final words from you.
Thanks, Fatani. I like to run. I'm an ultra marathon runner. Well, I like to run long distance, and especially when you're running a marathon, you start to recognize the faces around you around the middle of the marathon. You start to see, oh, we're more or less on the same track here, and we are familiar to each other. What's really problematic is if a race doesn't have proper signposts, because then we run all over and we're going left, right, and center, and then we start to see each other in frustration. So it's lovely to start to recognize some of the faces on this call, some of the colleagues who've been working on this. We have been on this road together, and it's wonderful to now have a roadmap that's properly signposted as to where we are all running towards. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely way to close the panel. Thank you to all three of you. Let me now introduce Yara Tarabolsi, Outreach and Advocacy Officer with the Global Alliance for Care, who will share with us her reflections on the role of the Alliance and the implementation of the roadmap. Yara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Foteini, and thanks, of course, to all of the organizations that are behind the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy. First of all, for convening this space where we can think about going forward and how to link the recommendations of the roadmap to our own work, and also, of course, for all of the enormous, tremendous effort to create such a concise but also comprehensive and practical tool for advocacy and for mobilizing around this care agenda that we all care about so much. And of course, thanks to the panelists as well for the insights, for the wealth of expertise that you not only bring to this space, but you bring to the Alliance also as our members, ILO, Equimundo, IDRC. It's always wonderful to have you participate as part of this global community. And of course, I think, first of all, responding to the panel, I think it's great to hear all of the work that's happening, all of the different and diverse initiatives that you're working on, and they reflect the diversity, I think, of angles through which different actors address this agenda, and how encouraging it is to see that so many different issues are converging and being understood through a care lens, whether decent work, climate change, data collection, working on social norms and men's engagement. It's fantastic to see really the breadth that this agenda has to offer to us, and how different actors can engage with it. And this is, I think, one of the Global Alliance for Care's main missions, that it was thought of when it was launched, is to break silos and bring these different sectors and actors together in conversation, position care at the center of development, and establish this really as everyone's agenda. And of course, I have to mention that as part of the transformative vision on care, which is one of the first initiatives that the Alliance worked on after its creation, our members define care as a public good, and the state as a primary duty bearer for its provision and for the recognition, reduction, and redistribution of care work, as well as reward and representation of care workers. So of course, I had to commend the presence of the government of Colombia, which is another inspiring member of the Alliance, and its commitment to designing and implementing a comprehensive care system with also an innovative approach of the territorial community-based perspective, and as well as its constant engagement with global and multi-stakeholder dialogues on care. So since I've been talking about the Alliance so much, I'd like to say just a few words about it in case you're not familiar with it. It's a multi-stakeholder platform which was convened by the government of Mexico and UN Women during the 2021 Generation Equality Forum in the context, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic, where women's disproportionate responsibility for care work and the negative impacts this has on their well-being and personal development became all the more visible. And today, a little over 3 years after its launch, it has over 240 members from different sectors, national and local governments, private sector, academia, civil society, international organizations, unions, and multilateral agencies, all of which are committed to advancing the care agenda as a pivotal element for achieving both gender equality and a sustainable future more broadly. And over the past few years through the Alliance, these members have been positioning this transformative vision on care in different multilateral fora like the G20, CSW, UNGA, and many others. And we've also facilitated horizontal exchange and learning on best practices for care policies, as well as dialogues on topics such as financing care system, what it means to consider care as a right, etc. So going back to the roadmap, recently the Alliance members approved their strategic priorities for the next 5 years, which identify many of these key milestones, which have already been mentioned, and some more, and the pillars that are going to be guiding our work for the next 5 years. And I think the roadmap, which was also developed, of course, by a group of Alliance members, will be a key tool for achieving many of these. And first of all, within the domain of multilateral care advocacy, which is one of our strategic priorities, which is going to be strengthened in the Alliance, and through also positioning the cross-cutting nature and centrality of care in the development agenda, the roadmap offers many concrete ideas and important suggestions for spaces to do this work, such as the World Bank sessions, the G20, and others. And it identifies these opportunities for advocacy from previous multilateral negotiations, commitments, and resolutions. It sees where we are and how we can make care more part of the conversation, which is a very valuable insight. And it also provides fundamental inputs to track relevant multilateral frameworks, which can drive policy at the national or local level, which is something the Alliance is very much interested in doing. And also, of course, one of the most valuable aspects of this roadmap is that it identifies some very concrete policy asks, which we can use in order to promote articulation, cooperation between these different actors that are going to these multilateral fora and kind of position a more or less cohesive or coherent narrative across all of these actors. Another aspect I wanted to highlight is that during the participatory process, which led to the development of our strategic priorities, our members expressed that if we want care to be cross-cutting in conversations around sustainable development, gender equality, and beyond, we're going to have to be even more ambitious and go beyond these spaces that have been naturally ours in the multilateral sphere, such as those centered on gender equality or feminist movements. So I'm very pleased that both within the roadmap and also through these conversations, it's coming up that we need to start making noise in different fora where not only care, but also perspectives on gender more broadly have been absent or have been difficult to position. So for example, the COP and the IMF sessions, etc., and all of these kinds of spaces. And another point which I'm also pleased to see highlighted is that we also maybe need to start thinking about some alternative advocacy spaces where we can really bring the conversation and on care within our own terms and have it be, I mean, even if we do participate in these multilateral fora, having these spaces where we don't have such rigid structures or traditional multilateral advocacy ways of doing things will be very important, which is why I'm also so pleased to be partnering with the MenCare Summit. And I think it's going to be a crucial space to maybe bring the conversation in a different way and in a more creative and innovative way. So that's another point. And of course, the ILC resolution on decent work and the care economy was a monumental achievement, and it gives us a very important way forward on thinking about care work and decent work and guaranteeing the rights of care workers. And the ILO's mandate, which was established in this resolution, is going to make it a key ally and a very critical actor to be collaborating with and to advance the care agenda both within the world of work and beyond. I'll try to be brief because I know we don't have much more time, but I just wanted to say that the roadmap is also going to help us with our priority related to knowledge generation because of its emphasis on data. It also offers some key indicators that can be tracked to measure global progress and provide insights into where we are now in terms of global progress in care policies, but also what we need. And finally, I also really wanted to appreciate that the roadmap itself acknowledges the Global Alliance for Care as a critical avenue for collaboration and for coordination for transformative action. So of course, membership of the Alliance is seen as a clear commitment to building more caring societies. So strengthening this alliance is of course strengthening this agenda itself. And I'll just stop here, congratulating once again the team, CIPPEC, CGD, SRW, Asia Foundation, Women Deliver. I hope I didn't leave anyone out. And I hope I'd like you to consider the Alliance as a home for this roadmap and one that we're sure is going to be furthering our mission for collective action and building more caring societies, of course, with everyone that's present and beyond.
Thank you so much, Yara. And indeed, the Alliance is a much needed multi-stakeholder space where we can come together and have these conversations and reforms and create, as you mentioned, our own advocacy spaces that connect with, but also go beyond the traditional multilateral advocacy spaces. Let me now introduce my colleague Eleanor Blomstrom, Senior Manager of Policy and Advocacy at Women Deliver, who will be moderating our Q&A session. Thank you to those who have added your questions to the chat. And Eleanor, over to you.
Thank you, Fotini. Hi, everyone. So we've had such a rich discussion and heard from a lot of different voices and perspectives. We have about 10 minutes for the Q&A session. And I have been looking in the chat and haven't seen much there. There was one question about whether we had looked at the Oxfam policy scorecard, and that was answered in the chat that yes, it was very useful, and we'd like to explore how to be complementary as we move forward. So I will give people a little time to consider if they do have questions. And in the meantime, I think what I could do is, okay, so I have a couple questions on deck, but I see Sahar has raised a question about what is being done to elevate the social profile of care work and alliances to change the perception of it on the community level. It's a question kind of addressing social attitudes toward care work that haven't changed. And so specifically, they mentioned Carolina and Wessel. And why don't we start with this one about changing perceptions of care work and how there's still some negative social attitudes, it sounds like, and what can be done to change that. I'll turn it first to Wessel if you have something.
Sure. Thanks, Eleanor. No, I think this is very much the question that lies behind our summit that we are organizing in 2026 to elevate the importance and to center the value of an ethic of care and to have powerful allies in government, but also in media and the private sector to contribute towards achieving that goal. A specific example that might be useful is some work that we've been doing analyzing media portrayals of men's caregiving with the Gina Davis Institute to look at where do particularly streaming platforms highlight men's contribution to care in a realistic way, in an inspiring way. So on our wheelhouse, which is fatherhood and men's caregiving, we've tried to nudge media makers in the direction of actually highlighting the importance of care. But going beyond men's caregiving and fatherhood, I think, as Yara was saying, besides talking to each other, really trying to influence social spaces where people stream, Netflix or whatever, Apple or whatever platform you're on. We have seen some changes, and it is, I think, as people are starting to become more aware of this, and particularly after COVID, we have seen more attention being given to care in narratives and storylines. So hopefully that continues. It's not a very systematic response, Sahar. I'm a little bit intimidated to the request for a systematic overview, but I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much, Wessel. And I'm going to throw a couple more questions at you both, but then turn it to anyone who wants to take some of these. So as all of you are speaking, including Lorenza, Yara, and the presentation of the roadmap itself, we heard so many different ideas. We talked about sort of the economic role of care. So one of the questions that you could consider answering is about the role of GDP and the importance of going beyond GDP to understand the importance of care to economies and societal well-being. Another question that was touched upon, I think, was the idea of domestic workers and migrants as well. And so in this framework of intersectionality, how are some of your projects or programs, or how do you see policies should better reflect intersectionality and support, especially those most marginalized, like migrants and domestic workers? So I will see if, I think we still have Laura from the panel. And then, of course, if any of the other speakers want to, please just express interest and we'll make sure to spotlight you and give you a chance.
Thank you. Just I'd like to mention to actually touch upon the three questions. First, regarding GDP, an important milestone will be next year discussion about the national account, the national account definition that will question really the measurement of GDP, and I think this network and the GRAC, I think, plays a key role in pushing the recognition of unpaid care work within the boundaries of GDP. So it's there have been attempts, but I think we need to transform the way GDP is measured and systematically include this work in its measurement. And there are examples. We had Colombia. We also attempted in the 2018 report to do an exercise aimed at giving, a global figure at the ILO. Another effort is actually measuring, we need to measure this work that, as Sarah indicated, continues to be viewed as inherently inferior job. So the effort of, measuring who are the care workers, who are the persons that provide care, under what conditions this work is performed, and the ILO and the ILO Decent Work Agenda, the new resolution really aim at making this work inherently considered inferior as decent work, value it, and this is why also we have this 5R framework that really highlights the importance of rewarding and representing care workers. There are a number of initiatives actually that have tackling, the groups that are most vulnerable, and the resolution recognized not only that is a gendered but also intersectional dimension, where racialized groups, migrant workers, workers from minorities, indigenous peoples are overrepresented among those that provide both paid and unpaid care work. So we have a great example actually from today's celebration of the 10-year fair recruitment initiative that tackles migrant workers, including migrant care workers. It's an initiative that aims really at adopting a framework for fair recruitment for migrant care workers and migrant workers, including migrant care workers. And also soon the ILO will publish global estimates on migrant workers. So we have finding ways also to elevate, and of course from the trade union movement, that actually was at the origin of this International Day for Care and Support. It was, it comes from a trade union initiative a few years ago that now has become an international UN day. So these initiatives are very important because it brings us put light on the issues, the challenges around the care economy. And I would like also to highlight the work around domestic workers and the International Domestic Workers Federation that has really come a long way. When around 20 years ago, nobody would consider paid domestic work as work or workers, and the initiative of millions of workers organized, unionized, has led to the adoption of an international labor standard, Convention 189, that has helped transform really the conditions of domestic workers around the world. And you can search ILO website around on the initiative at the national level, including extending social security, formalizing domestic workers, training, professionalizing their work in general, including domestic workers, and dignifying this work that should be, part and parcel of national care and support systems. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you, Wessel, for your previous answer. It looks like we're now at time to switch over to our closing remarks from Florencia. And I just wanted to really appreciate the responses you've given. And of course, if anyone still has more questions, you can put them in the chat and we can do our best to answer them, maybe offline. So now, Florencia, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Eleanor. And thank you all for such an insightful and enriching discussion. And many thanks, especially to our panelists for their thoughtful contributions on advancing the global roadmap for care. As shared by Kelsey and Ankita, this roadmap is envisioned as a vital tool to place the care and support economy at the forefront of global agendas critical to sustainable development and gender equality, with the ultimate goal of better integrating care and support into policymaking processes and driving essential investment decisions. We know that challenges are big because data remains limited, public spending on care and support is often insufficient, and policies tend to be fragmented, while households and women remain overwhelmingly responsible for addressing care in its myriad forms. We know that competing priorities for scarce funding in low and middle income countries and a concerning backlash against policies advancing social, economic, and gender justice add to these difficulties. Nonetheless, the care and support economy represents a unique opportunity in the context of today's interconnected crisis, which fundamentally threaten the sustainability of life as we know it. The points raised during the discussion today are especially pertinent towards this endeavor. Our speakers have highlighted the need to understand care as both a human right and a collective responsibility, the crucial link in caring for people, caring for the planet, and caring for our biodiversity, as well as the connections between local efforts and global challenges. Our speakers have also addressed the need for achieving shared responsibility across diverse stakeholders and between genders as being crucial for a sustainable future in the care and support economy. So we invite each of you to actively engage with the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy, as well as with the Global Alliance for Care. We also encourage you to elevate and socialize the roadmap's recommendations, leveraging them to inspire new approaches, stronger policies, and meaningful investments in care and support. Let's continue thinking collectively about how can we best advance the roadmap's next steps, ensuring care and support becomes central to the global policy agenda. So thank you once again for joining us today, and we really look forward to staying in touch as we continue this global roadmap journey together.